The wheel of time turns, and ages come and go, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind arose in the mountains of mist. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. The Wheel of Time turns and podcasts come and go. Welcome to WOTCast, a Wheel of Time book club and now Watch Club. We are reading through Robert Jordan's epic fantasy series and watching Amazon's Wheel of Time TV show, which premiered 2 weeks ago, and we are now all the way deep into episode 4. Today, we're not going to be talking about the book, Eye of the World. We're just going to be talking about episodes 3 and 4 of Wheel of Time on Amazon. I am Caleb Wimble, and with me today is Keeley Frank.
Hello.
And special guest, Nicholas Wicks.
Guys.
Nick, it is awesome to have you. Before I have you introduce yourself to everybody, I'll just remind folks that you can find us all at WOTCast.net and support the show at patreon.com/WOTCast. Your support means a lot. Even $2 at the Two Rivers tier helps. Join us on Patreon at the $5 Tar Valen tier, and you'll get access to special bonuses. There are 2 of them up so far where we talk about Dune, both the novel and the history of the series, the other movies, and the new Denis Villeneuve one. It's a pretty cool series of discussions. In the future, we'll be talking about things like Wheel of Time short stories, graphic novels, video games, TV pilots that you haven't seen in all likelihood, and more. Email us questions, comments, and corrections at contact@wotcast.net with the subject line questions. We'll answer them here on the show. Nick, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us about yourself and your relationship to Wheel of Time as our first official WOTCast guest?
Sure. So I'm like an hour southwest of Philly, but in terms of my relationship with Wheel of Time, I started reading the book series probably 6 months ago, not even knowing there was a TV show coming out. And I just finished book 9 today, actually, and started the prologue of 10.
Oh, man. Big events in book 9.
Yeah.
Not
lots of things coming together.
Yep.
Yeah. And so then, yeah, I did catch the episode 4, or was it episodes 4 last night? And then I caught the other ones when they first came out last week as well.
So that's pretty cool that you're basically doing the same thing a lot of us on the WOTCast are coming to the first time reading the books and doing the show, except you got a much bigger head start than most of us getting through the books that fast. What are your thoughts on the series, without getting into spoiler territory, your thoughts on the series so far, the books in general, I guess, and how you're feeling about the show these first 4 episodes in?
Yeah, the book series is awesome. I mean, I had a friend of mine recommend it to me, and he said he had read it like 3 times. And I was like, that's insane. So I've got to read this series. And yeah, I think the first book caught my interest. I think it was like later I learned that he hadn't signed like a deal for the whole series at that point, and so I feel like the first book, it definitely caught my interest, and then once I got into the second one, I think that's when I got hooked, and then just started reading like a book every 2 weeks. I feel like just trying to blaze through them the last 6 months or so. Yeah, but very happy with the book series. I think it's really compelling, and then the TV series, I think I'm on the fence on. There are some things that I find really good. Other things that I have like pet peeve about here or there. Probably because I've just read the book so recently. But overall, pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I would think it makes a big difference too, having gotten a lot farther, because so much of our experience, and even me who read the entire book series before, Eye of the World leaves so much to the second half or the last quarter of the book. And there's so much of even the character development, I feel like, that does not happen until book 2. But that the show, I think, is probably my favorite part about the show, is that they have sort of advanced the characters along a little bit at the beginning, and they're a little bit older, and they're getting a little bit more of the personalities that we see come out later in the first book and in the other series. But if you've just read all the way through 9, the characters go through so much and have so much more development that takes place. The ones that make it anyway. I would imagine gives a very different perspective on the way the show is depicting them so far.
Yeah, there's so much character development in each of the books. But yeah, you're right. The first book really does pack a lot into the last quarter. But I feel like the show has been doing a good job of like sticking to, not like to the letter of the law, if you will, but spirit of it, trying to stick to the spirit of what they're trying to accomplish in the show, and maybe not hitting on all the points they need to, or maybe adding something that weren't there in the books, but still in a way that they're illustrating the characters accurately.
This week's episode, yesterday was Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving to everybody listening to this. Probably not until a few days after, at least. But we got episode 4, which was called, tellingly, I think, The Dragon Reborn, and gave us maybe our biggest set of changes, or not so much changes as different framing and order of events and time from the book. Like, things happen in a very different order in episode 4, and in a very different set of locations than they do in Eye of the World. I don't know if you remembered all those being so different, Nick, or if it's been a lot, if you've gotten so many books through that didn't stand out so much that they changed it. But it feels dramatic reading Eye of the World. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I did notice that. Yeah, you could tell. I remember because I think the first book probably left the biggest impression on me, and then the middle ones are all sort of a blur of a different plot turns. But yeah, I do. You could tell the locations and the situations changed a little bit.
I guess we should just start with episode 3, since we haven't talked about it on the show, and quickly go through our thoughts on that one, which we didn't touch on last week, predominantly because I was talking at first with Katie and then with Dan, who had only seen through the first 2 episodes. And episodes 1 and 2, they set up everything in the 2 rivers. At least the first 5 to 10 chapters is all crammed in there in the first episode. Emmons Field mostly burns down. Moiraine leaves with her charges. We skipped most of the inns and cities. It just took us right along the road on like this really high octane chase sequence to Shadar Logoth, where we skipped the figure of Mordeth, but we still had Mashadar, the Black Mist, represented as this kind of, I thought, pretty cool, almost cartoony shadow that is traveling, not in like a cartoony, colorful way, but like the camera would pan up and just parts of the city are turning pure black as Mashadar spreads, chases the party, separates them, brings us to episode 3, a place of safety, where Moiraine is trying to hunt everybody down with Lan, except Moiraine is injured in the show very badly, so she is increasingly unconscious for most of episode 3 as the Sheo Ghoul poison works into her, and I start to wonder whether Rosamund Pike was maybe not available for as much filming on this, or if this was a purely dramatic decision. And Matt and Rand are trekking across the wilderness and trying to find their way on their own, because there is no Thom Merrilin yet at the beginning of episode 3 of the show. So they have no guide, no guardian. Egwene and Perrin are running, and they also have no guide, no guardian, because Elias also does not show up yet. And finally, Nynaeve comes back in. She escaped from the Trollocs, which is an even more dramatic way, I think, of her tracking down the party in the book. I thought that was a pretty cool, that's a good dramatic addition to have her taken from the 2 rivers, fake out that she might be dead, but definitely not, because we didn't see her die, and then catch up here and try her best after Lan convinces her to try to heal Moiraine. And then finally, even though we don't meet Elias or Thom early on, Rand and Matt end up in a mining town where they meet Thom, a very different version of Thom, I think, from the Thom we know at that point in the books. And then finally, Egwene and Perrin, after running from wolves for a while, some strangely acting wolves, meet the Tuatha'an, the traveling folk, or the Tinkers. Keeley, did you have any immediate thoughts on episode 3? I'll tip my hand by saying episode 3 is my least favorite episode of the show so far, and has maybe my least favorite changes. Although I do think, getting ahead of ourselves, that episode 4 mostly made up for that for me. So I don't know. How did you feel about this point in the TV show?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you that so far I thought episode 3 was kind of like meh. I'm still conflicted about how they've changed Thom in the show, because he is such a big part, and it feels kind of, I don't really know how to explain it, but just it feels like a part of the family was just thrown in last second, I guess we'll throw Thom in. Also that whole scene of like him being kind of a dick to Matt and taking his money at the beginning, and then kind of having his own like redemption with Matt later when he's getting the valuables off of the corpse was like, what was that? That was weird. I didn't super enjoy that. The entire character of the barmaid, I forget what her name is, like Dana or something. What the hell was that? I don't know if that's. I'm only like halfway through chapter 33 in the first book, so I don't know if she's gonna end up being part of it, but that just felt so weird. Like I told you, Jerry, my husband, was sitting here watching part of that episode with me, having not watched or read anything. And the whole time I'm like, she's got to be a dark friend. She has to be a dark friend. She's just fucking up for Voldemort. She's got to be a dark friend. And then at the end, they announced it, and he was like, oh, you were right. I was like, well, it was weird. I think probably my favorite part, though, of that entire thing was her being like, oh, no one could break down that door. And then Rand just going full Hulk and breaking it down. I was like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, there were like a bunch of those the book changes in that set of scenes, right? Even knocking down the door. I think in the book it was like lightning that came down, right, and broke open the wall or something.
Yeah, in the scene with that one rich merchant dark friend who's been trailing them. But I feel like what this episode was doing, because we have skipped every inn and town the party stays at so far, that's partly a frustration for me, because I feel like we've lost a lot of the color of the world and a lot of the local culture and feeling and like sense of place. This mining town felt kind of like a movie set to me. It didn't really feel like a real place with real people. None of the background characters have anything to say except background and, just chatter. They didn't feel like real people. And Dana sort of has the job of compressing, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 different dark friends that they meet in the course of that middle section of the novel where Rand and Matt are on the run. Yeah, and she also has to do a lot of the emotional heavy lifting of various conversations that Rand has with different farmers and characters they pass along the road, and some people who are more sympathetic to what the boys might be going through and on the run, and some who are more skeptical. And it's just all placed on her as one character who, as you said, Keeley, you were thinking from the very moment you saw her and she started being too nice initially, I guess, like there's something like that. She's got an agenda in the moment that she starts talking with them.
I was trying to figure out at one point, I don't think I saw them refer to her as Dana until maybe I saw it in a caption thing. But at first I was wondering if this was like, this was Min or something, because
that's what I
like, I was like, oh, is this how they're introducing Min? Because the Min was introduced early in the series, and there was like a town. But I also thought it was weird, the mining aspect of it specifically, because I was also coming at it from, oh, is this where they're like, there was a scene where they're digging out, one of like the statues or whatever in I forget I think it was book 1, but maybe
one
it
of
wasn't.
the artifacts from the Age of Power. They passed partly dug out.
And so that was the only mining that I remember from that book. So I thought I couldn't place where they were, because I feel like I remember when they left to go to Keeneland, it was all like farm towns or like not. I don't remember seeing anything about mining. So I was trying to figure out what was going on there and approaching it from an angle.
Yeah, it's totally something. I mean, Dana, the only thing that is actually from a direct scene in the books, I think, other than, the door breaking down is reminiscent of the lightning moment. Dana is the name of a dark friend at some point, I think, but I can't remember which one. And she certainly didn't die like that this early. So I think they're taking her for somewhere else. But the mining town thing that's not there, I wonder if maybe partly what is feeling kind of fake to me about all of it is that as much as I am enjoying the show a lot so far and the way they're adapting things, I don't feel like there's much of a place being established for types of clothing and dialect and culture indicating a part of the world, which is something, that's a big strength, I feel, of Game of Thrones. And something that people loved about Game of Thrones was that, it's like a thinly veiled medieval Europe in a lot of ways, and with thinly veiled England's 100 Years' War with elements of the War of the Roses. So you get a real sense of like, a character's accent and their dialect, and it tells you a lot about their class, tells you a lot about their culture, where they're from in this world. Their dress tells you if they're from down south or across the sea, or if they're up north where they have the fur-lined stuff. Wheel of Time, as much as I like a lot of the costume work and things, I don't feel like it's communicating much. Like what the characters wear, other than the Tuatha'an, just seems like a medley of Renaissance fair type fantasy garb, and the characters' accents are all over the place because the Two Rivers folk, they don't necessarily sound Irish or anything or from like the North Country. They just, so many people just sound like vaguely Queen's English, which may be because this is a cast from all over the world, and like Rand's actor is Danish, and we have actors who are American, and we have actors who are English, and then others from various parts of Europe. So maybe that's a necessary complication of having they cast for the actors they wanted, not necessarily for the world they wanted to build. But I do feel like something about this mining town felt the weakest and fakest to me of any location so far. Keeley, you were mentioning this Thom we get not really jiving right away. I feel like he's winning me a bit more in episode 4, but in ep 3, I'm like, who is this low energy bad country singer being a dick to Matt? Like the moment that he meets them, this is not Thom. And that's the first time I felt that about a character, I think.
Yeah, it just felt kind of lazy and like a weird way to introduce him as like a big part of their lives. But going to what you were saying, like he even says to Matt, like, "Oh, from your accent and your clothes, I can tell you're from the Two Rivers." Like, bullshit, you can, because all of your accents don't make fucking sense. But yeah, I didn't really like kind of the whole vibe of how he's being introduced. And then again, it's another kind of strange adult showing up like, just trust me. Like, why? I'm happy that Rand was like, "What? Like, who the hell are you? Why should I trust you?" Like, everyone is, potentially a bad guy. So, I will say that I do enjoy the kind of, not necessarily like banter, but like the witty comments coming from some of the different people. Like first episode when Rand he's doing that whole scene with Egwene, and he goes to hand her the berry, and she's like, "This in your fucking pocket all day?" Like, gross. And then when Matt and Rand get separated, and Rand is like talking about the Lord, he's like, "Well, all roads lead to this," and Rand's like, "That's not how or Matt said, "That's not how roads work." It's like, so I am enjoying that they're like calling things out a little bit. So I'll say like some of that dialogue has been good, and I hope that they keep that up.
That was even something that came up on the podcast because I don't remember if it was you, but folks were talking about, wait a second, why do they have to go to Camelin to get to Tar Valon? And we were pulling out the maps and like trying to figure out how the roads work in this world. And then, the characters kind of, like you said, they put a pin in it for us here because we can't see a map on screen necessarily. So they're giving us like the lay of the land a bit.
Like some of the stuff that they're explaining is okay, but it also kind of feels kind of lazy.
I'm hoping like the Thom thing, maybe my only thought is like maybe they're trying to show him as like washed up from his former self, and maybe later on we'll get a glimpse of like a more glamorous, mustachioed, like white-haired Thom. That's what I'm hoping.
Actually do acrobatics and like leap around. Yeah. Yeah, maybe because there is a big reveal that we have already gotten to in the book, so we can talk. I believe we can spoil it here because it's not a spoiler to our listeners who are reading along. That we already know now that Thom was a major court figure in Andor and Camelin, and he had this love affair with Queen Morghese, and it was like basically one of the most respected bards in the world, and considered one of the most knowledgeable. Something the show even hints at a little more explicitly here. I guess it's in episode 4. He's like, people fear Gleeman because Gleeman know things, and they know a lot. And there's the hint that they're not just entertainers; they're also spies and sort of librarians of knowledge from across the entire world as they travel all over the place. So we do start to get maybe a little bit more of that coming in. Oh, the only other thing I wanted to be sure to say about the mining town was you mentioned the scene with the corpse and Matt Keeley. We get the Aiel corpse. I did feel like this was one of those good compressed world building moments. It's one of those things where Jordan references the Aiel at various places in the first half of the novel, and we hear like snippets about the Aiel War. But I thought it was a pretty good distillation to show us an actual, even admittedly a dead Aiel who basically we hear has been lynch mobbed and was searching Andor or the Western world for something. Did we find out what he was looking for when people got suspicious of him, and then basically the whole town teamed up to kill him because they think of Aiel as Outlander monsters essentially, and he is dressed in a way that is actually distinct from everybody. So we get that. Did anybody have any thoughts on that particular moment and the emotional beat with Matt and Thom there?
Wasn't there was it's interesting that they had him cut the corpse down because there's I forget if it's in that book or a later one, there's a scene similar to that I won't give it away anything, but like where someone one of the characters cuts a corpse down. So
Right.
I did think that like allusion to that scene maybe what had something to do with it. I thought was like kind of nice, even if it's not the exact place characters. That's
a great pull. I
memorable.
totally forgot about that. Yeah,
that was a memorable scene. But I don't think they talked about like exactly why they killed him, other than Thom alluding to just general nativism and like mistrust of strangers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the only thing that he said was something about like if they're wearing, didn't he say something about like if they're wearing the thing over their
veil,
face, then they're considered dangerous because they're like covering something. But then he pulls down the veil and he shows Matt like, but he was just like a dude. I didn't totally understand what he was getting at there, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. He does share that tidbit about we have heard in the novel in passing people have used like as an insult black veiled Aiel and stuff like that. I think that was one of the first ones we called out as like, oh, like basically ethnic disparagements that we hadn't gotten until then. But yeah, that's a really good point. Thom points out that you can tell if an Aiel is dangerous and is about to kill you because their veil is going to be up there, but they're totally harmless if the veil is down. They don't intend any violence, which ultimately leads up after Matt and Thom sort of make pleasant acquaintances, and for whatever reason Matt sort of decides to trust him, despite that Matt is really distrusting and paranoid at this point. He does ultimately show up to save them from Dana, who I thought this scene did not work for me. I thought it was almost comical, her stealing Rand's heron blade and chasing them around, waving it like through the laundry in the village. It was something out of a Looney Tunes bit almost in the backyard here. And then somehow this is at this point, I don't think you can do this in Hollywood. Like, Thom saves them by as Dana is standing there giving a speech about how all the Dark Friends know who they are, and they have the 5 from the 2 rivers in their dream, and the 5, not the 4. Who is this 5th person that she's talking about? Because we only know a 4 that Moiraine is interested in. And then suddenly a dagger shoots through her neck. Not like into her neck or throat, through her spine. A dagger emerges and is. People get impaled by a lot of things in the show so far, I'm noticing, in very like large metal implements way that go clean through them. I don't care how skilled Thom is with a knife. Nobody is throwing a knife through a spine. A spine is a really thick, sturdy, anyway, but Thom saves them from her, and then they decide to run off with him, I guess because more Dark Friends are going to be on the way. I'm seeing like silent laughter and shaking heads about the chasing around the sword scene. I take it didn't work for anyone.
I think that was the worst scene of the whole series so far for me. I really think. I mean, Keeley, you alluded to it. Like, it's just like this innkeeper, even if she is a Dark Friend, knows how to use a blade like that. Like, she also had like some fancy sword work that was going on too, which felt really off.
Yeah, and like at one point, so like Jerry was sitting there watching it. They keep cutting from like Rand running to Dana, and at one point they cut back and she's straight up doing like the Terminator like run, and Jerry and I both were like, what the hell is that? Like, how did she turn into almost like an anime character chasing him through this town? And then I'm kind of getting the same vibe from like the first episode where like Moiraine is basically standing in the rain outside waiting for Lan to announce her, where like, so was Thom supposed to be like on his way that whole time to find them, or was he like standing in the shadows waiting for the perfect moment to impale her with this knife? Like dramatic entrance, because it's like, oh, she conveniently had enough time to explain all these things before she drops dead.
Yeah.
So just like I think because of how ridiculous the scene was up to that point, it kind of, the immersion broke, and then I started questioning everything about the scene, which kind of sucked. But
which is a shame, I think, because the actual novel scene in the inn where Rand and Matt are kind of stuck late at night and can't leave, where they're being forced to play because the innkeeper and his giant muscled goons wants to kill them and rob them. But then there's also a Dark Friend that they suspect is there, this guy in the fancy dress who wants to go. So they're kind of like trapped up in the room, and they're there trying to figure out how to get out tonight. And we get the showdown, and the Dark Friend winds up killing the innkeeper's guys and is waiting outside the door with a whole bunch of armed guards. Like, like it's not just one fancy rich dude who's got to steal Rand's sword and wave it around. They've got like a little posse here. There's no way out. They're on the second floor. They can't really jump out the window without hurting themselves badly. And then we get the like leading up to the lightning strike that comes through, which to me, and then knocks them unconscious and then blinds Matt. That is way more dramatic, and that scene was more effective for me than anything that happens on screen here. So I feel like they should have just taken that. That was like ready made for cinema right there. And the only thing I can think is that they wanted to get that. Well, they still could have had the Dana monologue, because that particular dark friend gives a monologue outside the door, trying to convince them to, open the door, and here's what the Dark One's going to give you. He'll make you dreadlords. He will give you immortality and power and everything you want. And all you got to do is, you just got to be on the right side of history here and breaking the wheel. And yeah. So I guess what else happens in this episode? We get a lot of stuff with Moiraine being unconscious, and with Nynaeve and Lan arguing, and Nynaeve finally agreeing to try to heal Moiraine, although she doesn't really succeed. She just kind of staves off the worst of the infection, I guess, which was an interesting choice, but it's giving us more time with just Moiraine and Lan, whereas in the book, we never get to see the scenes alone with them because we're stuck in Rand's perspective. And all Rand notices is that there's some weird looks being exchanged between the two. Although we do get the Nynaeve perspective chapters with her competition thing she has going on about their tracking abilities. I thought, these scenes worked. They were pretty functional. I didn't have a whole lot of thoughts about them on this episode for the Moiraine, Lan, and Nynaeve stuff. Either of you?
I think the one scene that kind of let me down was, so she gets all the stuff, she goes over to Moiraine, and then she looks at Lan and says, like, they say that the warders can feel what the Aes Sedai feel, so, like, prepare yourself, this is gonna hurt, and, like, mushes the stuff into the wound, and then nothing happens. I was like, did he feel it? What happened?
Oh, like, you didn't notice Lan's temple subtly throbbing there,
like,
and then working his jaw?
A tiny bit, but it was like, it wasn't enough to be like, no. He's actually, like, it felt kind of lame. Like, they set it up like, you're about to get fucked up, and he was just like, he clenched his jaw. Like, that kind of let me down. Like, if you're gonna specifically put that dialogue in, you have to make it noticeable that, like, she's in pain, and not just more Rosamund Pike laying there dramatically.
Well, I think they're clearly trying to sell that Lan is really, really stoic and has a really, really high pain tolerance. But I agree, there needed to be a little more visual indicator there. Like, he could grunt at least as taking that vicarious agony. And is that when they do meet the Red Aja at the end of the episode, right? Leading Logain to Caemlyn. And is this the first time we actually learned that's Logain? Because we had him in the prologue to episode 1, but he's never named. He's like running from the Red Aja there.
Was it the third? I thought it was the 4th episode where they named.
Maybe the recap mentions his name at the end of episode 3, but we do see him arrive in the crate, right? And they call him, or they just call him a false dragon at that point.
Yeah,
is that what happens? Okay, so we're getting this Theandrin encounter here, and then kind of hanging with them, and we get Perrin and Egwene finally making it to the Tuatha'an, the Tinkers, which I am really glad the Tinkers are here. I felt like this introduction lost a lot of emotional context and narrative context without Elias being the one who introduces them, and without having met the thing, because they don't know the song, and they don't even know who the Tinkers are necessarily. So the Tinkers kind of have to prompt them. They give the first bit of their religious bit about we seek the song and whatever that part is, and then Aram. I think it's Aram, who is the young one of the Tinkers, is like, you're supposed to say, and then they fill in, but we don't get a whole lot of them here. They're kind of just the tail end of the episode on that introduction. Yeah. Anything else we should say about Ep 3 before just rolling into episode 4 here?
No, I think it's a good like transition into episode 4. That last scene after the mining town, Nynaeve and Lan are starting all that adventure.
Yeah, so, so much happens in episode 4 of the Dragon Reborn, and so much is brought in from other parts of the book. It was like a whirlwind of activity and world building and character development. I was here for it. It's hard for me to separate childhood fanboyism and nostalgia from like seeing the characters I like brought to life. And even though there are big changes made here, they are changes that feel, like you said, Nick, early on, changes that feel true to the spirit of the story and for compressing things for television. So what are folks' impressions of this episode? If we want to try to remember what happens too, because we don't have a handy recap for this one. What were the big things that stuck out to you in last night's episode?
Definitely the play around Logain I thought was really well done. Even though there was a lot of, you said earlier, stretching of like where they are located, and I think some of the clothing aspects and the cultural aspects get lost in that too, because it was very distinct in the book. They're in a very different place. But yeah, that part, and then I think actually just jumping back to the Elias thing, I do think the Elias thing was, even though it was a bummer, I thought he was a great character. I think they did I understand why they did it, because it introduced another character in, and they could get away with like having the wolves kind of, get along with Perrin, or like push them, and you could see he has some sort of relationship with them, was like a pretty good way to substitute that, rather than another character.
Oh, you don't think they're still going to introduce Elias at some point? I assume he's going to show up at the Tinker Camp one night.
I don't know. Yeah. It feels like if you didn't introduce him now, maybe not later. I don't know.
Well, because they did that with Thom already, right? Where he doesn't show up in the Two Rivers at the beginning, the first episode, like he's supposed to, and they delay him till the third one to come in another place. A lot more condensation. Yeah.
Then I was gonna say, back to the episode 4, the Tuatha'an, I thought scenes were also really distinct in that episode, along with like the dragon scenes.
Does it open with the the false dragon scenes with Logain at the castle in Gildan and the siege, or is that near the? That's like the first thing I remember maybe of him. We get the scene of like the king and his guards running along the rooftop, and I don't know, is that anybody else here beside me played the Witcher 2 video game by chance? No, okay, because this scene is filmed and feels and looks exactly like the opening scene of the Witcher 2, where the king is also running from a magical assassin, like, and his guards staying behind on the thing, and the city's being sieged, and Logain's army is pulling in. This felt like probably one of the higher budget moments of the series so far, showing an actual castle. We don't see a lot of the army below, but we see them like sieging the gates and stuff, and we get so much communicated to us about Logain that is only in the background of the book up until this point, which is cool. We get visualizations of what the taint, the Dark One's touch on Sayadin, the male half of the One Power, looks like, because he's weaving a lot of flows of, I guess, that spirit that's going around him, but it's got this like slick black oil layer on. It does look kind of cartoony, but it sort of gets the point across, I think. And I thought that was a very cool moment. The moment he started like hearing all the voices and these figures like of the madness whispering to him and telling him all these things, it was a good bit of misdirection, because I'm leaning over to Eric and I'm like, wait a minute. This seems like he's gonna listen to the voices and kill the King of Gildan. And I'm like, but Logain has such a good handle on the madness in the book. He has like really firm control of what's happening and how to and still has. And then the very next moment, it's like a fake out, and he heals the King of Gildan instead of killing him as the voices want him to, and sort of does this recruitment moment of like the cult leader, or he actually, as Keeley and I were saying in the chat, he looks like fantasy Jesus to me. That's very much the vibe that Logain has going on here. Like, but you've got that sort of like messianic figure going on, and he tells the king, whose name escapes me, that the past dragons broke the world, my past lives, and I am here to bind it together and to join all the nations to be ready to face the Dark One. So already I thought that was. It's doing a really good job communicating so much about the Logain plotline and what his motivations are and who the dragon is to people of the world. And the fact that this king decides to he's convinced he signs on to join Logain's army, and but then we're skipping forward to Logain being captured by the Red Aja and everything.
The Logain thing is interesting too, because like I think the book 1, like you said, really just refers to him a lot in the background. It doesn't get very detailed, but definitely didn't have like this sort of scene in the book. But I thought the introduction of that scene, and I agree with you, it was really well done. I think was alluding to me, or foreshadowing that he's gonna have a stronger role than in the book series, because they're like clearly setting him up for like thinking he's the Dragon Reborn and some sort of plot line here beyond what we saw in the.
And even within the episode itself, at the risk of getting ahead of where we are recapping things, he plays such a pivotal role in this episode and for the other characters by the end of it, which I guess we should start to work towards, because the other two major plots of this episode are Moiraine and Lan and Nynaeve rejoined with Moraine's sisters, with some of the two of the Green Aja and 4 or 5 of the Red Aja, led by Leandrin, like the cohort that went to capture Logain. And we learned that they did it by stealth. They like snuck into his camp at night, and they shielded him from the One Power in his sleep, and they snuck him out of there and scared off his army with some lightning bolts. And I don't think this is something that happens at any point in Eye of the World. I don't think Nynaeve and Moiraine and Lan ever join up with the Leandrin like this. Maybe that'll come up later in the book and I'm forgetting this in Eye of the World. But I think these are events that are alluded to in the background of the Red Aja bringing Logain to Caemlyn. But to me, this communicated so much, and we learned so much about the Aes Sedai and about Warders and about Nynaeve's relationship with them here, that this whole plot line felt very well condensed to me. I really enjoyed almost every minute in the Aes Sedai camp. And we do learn so much here. I know Keeley, in the flood of things that we are picking up about the Aes Sedai and about how the One Power works and about the Warders and everything. And anything stand out to you in particular here in these scenes and these new characters we're meeting around the Aes Sedai camp?
I think I just in general kind of liked seeing the other relationships between Warders and Aes Sedai and like learning more about the different types of Aes Sedai. So I think so far we know that the red ones go after the men. The green ones are like the battle, and then they refer to the blue as spies, but have they really explained the differences between all the colors yet? Or is it just kind of like anecdotal?
No, just anecdotal, and even less in the novel. In Eye of the World, we have learned that the Red Aja they're the cops of the Aes Sedai. They're the ones who they police any use of the One Power, and they hunt down men who can channel and are really dangerous. Thom tells us in the novel, and he tells us here. We get that scene about his nephew Owen. If you're somebody on their radar, and yeah, like you said, we learn the green are the battle Aja, and that's it. And we know that Moiraine is blue here. We're informed, which is we don't learn till really late in Eye of the World. Even she wears blue all the time, but we don't know that she's blue Aja. And yeah, like you said, that there are the kind of spies and meddlers in the affairs of the world. We know that Moiraine, at least, she's the only blue we've seen, and she's very concerned about prophecy and attempting to line things up and interfere with Dark Friends and the Dark Ones' plans. But I think that's all we know, other than we've had people have mentioned the Black Aja, who are not supposed to be real, and the Aes Sedai deny they exist, but they're the Aja that are supposed to serve the Dark One. They're the Dark Friends among the Aes Sedai. I
think I like that they said, though, that Moiraine is kind of like the spy one, because I did feel like in the book, she has said so much that indicates that like she has so much knowledge of things. Like, they hint at how like powerful Egwene is, and just like I kept wondering, like, how does she know this? Like, if this is something that the Aes Sedai know, then why is she the only one in the Two Rivers? Like, why her specifically? So I like that they've kind of pointed out that like the blue are the ones that kind of try to figure things out. And then she even says to Lan, like, we've been searching for 20 years. We finally found them and we lost them. It's like, 20 years you focused on this particular thing.
Yep.
Okay, now I have context, and you're not like this all powerful, because she just kept coming across as like the most powerful of the Aes Sedai with no context. And so now I just appreciate that they kind of cleared that up a little bit.
It's interesting that none of them, the red or the green, even fully, like the red like her a lot less. The Leandrin really does not like Moiraine. We get the sense initially there's but also kind of fears and respects her. There's sort of this general distrust they seem to have for the blue, because the blue do know things, and the blue are so secretive and manipulative, even among Aes Sedai, which is interesting because a lot of the world building stuff we get from other people is that the Aes Sedai are manipulative and secretive and will get you to do things. They won't tell you the whole truth. They'll just tell you the truth that you think you hear, and that's basically what we also get among their role with the other Aes Sedai too. Nick, it looked like you had something to say on that.
I was just thinking through I think a lot came out the Aes Sedai and the Warders, like Keeley, like you said. It was, I think the relationships between the Warders was really interesting. You got Nynaeve kind of digging in on some of the Warders around the campfire and that whole scene, and then they also had Ilana introduced as which is like, which is funny because in the book I'm in, Ilana plays like a huge role. So to me, seeing her being introduced now was just perfect for me, because now I can like sort of imagine her, and I thought she was a strong character, and that's and Leandrin too has a very distinct description in the book of like the rosebud mouth, blonde hair, like, and I thought they made they had a very distinct actress play her, which I thought was really effective too. So I was very excited about the whole scenes surrounding Logain. Like I felt like that carried the episode. The other ones with the Tuatha'an I thought were great too, and then there was this with Matt and Rand, but I really felt like the central part of the episode was around the Logain camp.
Yeah, there's so much drama happening here, and we learn so much about the way the power functions. Although they did change something pivotal. Correct. Now you're steeped enough in the books, Nick, to correct me on this if I'm wrong. But I think they make it backwards about the shields in the show. They flip this on its head, where Moiraine says it is far harder to keep a shield on someone than to break out of one. That is, I believe, the opposite of how shielding works in the novels. It is very hard to put a shield on one. It's very hard to cut someone off from the one power in the first place and shield them. But I think they establish very clearly in the books, once you have a shield on someone, even a much weaker channeler can keep them shielded. Yeah. It's very, very hard to break out of one. And they flip that here.
Yeah, it's because they talk about how it's very difficult once someone has embraced one of the powers to put a shield on them.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Throw a shield on them when they don't have it at all. But then, yeah, you're right. Once they have the shield on them, it's very difficult to break out. And I mean, that scene where they have, to me, that was like, that keeps ringing in my head, where Moiraine is like stepped up to Logain and said, like, you may be powerful, but like the power you have is like, what did she say, like a candle burning the raging sun. And I was like, oh, that's part of the whole episode.
Dude, I love that moment of this tension of Moiraine wondering if this is the dragon. Like she's the one who, the one, you even get the sense she might betray her own sisters if she decides that Logain is the Dragon Reborn, because she is on this quest to find him and to get him ready to defeat the Dark One, period. And no matter who gets in her way, that is like her goal. And the other Aes Sedai are talking about the Red Aja want to immediately, like, they want to gentle and or kill him now rather than get him back to Tar Valon for trial. We have the tension of the two Green Aja, Alana, and the Aes Sedai who dies in this episode, whose name I have forgotten now, which is, she's cool in her brief scenes. I like the part she plays, and her warders are awesome. But then she dies in the course of this attack, and that tension of, no, we have to bring him back for trial. But the look, and this was a great Rosamund Pike moment, I thought. The look in her eyes when she decides while talking to Logain that he's not the Dragon Reborn, and because he says the thing about, like, he hears all the past lives of his own talking to him, and she's like, it's just the madness. You're just another one, and you're nowhere near as powerful as you are, like you said, Nick. Nowhere near powerful enough, which sets us up for, I thought, a pretty awesome moment at the end of this arc in this episode, which, even though it's the last thing in the episode, we can just get to, where Logain's army shows up, and there's chaos in the camp, and Logain breaks free of the shielding that Leandrin and this other green Aes Sedai have on him, and he is drawing in loads of the power, and there's this dramatic confrontation, and then Moiraine comes in the middle of all this fight to have this talk to see if he is the one. Turns out he's not the one as far as she's concerned. And then he basically almost single-handedly defeats and is going to kill all the Aes Sedai who are gathered there, the ones who come running in, and their warders. And they also give us some good information that Elaida almost draws enough of the power to, or not Elaida, Leandrin, other red, draws enough of the power to burn herself out. And Moiraine's like warning her, you're gonna, and we even get it visualized with, like, her face is starting to look like it's going to explode from light gathering in her. Logain still defeats them all, but then Nynaeve comes in. It's like Lan is lying on the ground in a pool of blood pouring out from his neck. He's gonna die any second now. And Nynaeve bursts into Super Saiyan mode. Her hair is like literally flying in the air with the one power as she touches it, and heals, even at a distance, like everyone in this room that Logain just killed, basically. Brings them all back in. Massive display of the power, and then Logain has that, he repeats Moraine's line, burning like the sun, or whatever it is about the amount of power. indicating with the episode name, they really that Nynaeve may actually be the Dragon Reborn that they're alluding to at the end here. And is that where we leave off with this plot line with this group at that moment? It's a pretty dramatic scene. What do you all think of Nynaeve revealed here, especially Keeley, since we know she can wield the power in the books? We haven't had a scene like this yet, though, right?
Yeah, I was so excited. Like watching it when the whole thing, she's like panicking in the woods, and I kept screaming like just do something, like just channel something, just fucking blow everyone up. And so I was kind of like let down that she just gets dragged into, towards the cave with Lan at that point. So then when it finally happened, I was like screaming at the TV like I scared my dog, because I was like, fuck yeah, like so excited for her. One thing I did notice though is that, so I don't know if this is like intentional or if the actor just has dark eyes, but the actor that plays Logain, when they zoomed in at one point on his eyes, they're solid black. Like his pupils are just black. There's no color.
When
and then
when he's channeling the one
no,
power.
just like in general. When I saw that when he was talking, I think to the king, I noticed, I was like, oh shit, his eyes are like, is that supposed to be a thing? And then I noticed, maybe I'm just picking up on shit, but when they zoom in on Nynaeve's face for like that final scene, that her eyes are also kind of dark like that, which again, like could just be there, they just have dark eyes in general. But it just, my brain picked up as like that parallel that like they can both access the power in different ways, but it might show itself physically in a similar way. I will say I was kind of confused though about how powerful Logain was supposed to be, because they make a point of saying that like, it doesn't even look like he's struggling. Like if we were actually containing anything that he was trying to push against, wouldn't he be like trembling or sweating or something? And then at one point, he does just kind of like burst out. And so I felt like he was going to play a bigger role, where like I said that like, oh, well, if he got caught this early, he got caught intentionally. And so for it to just kind of be like end of him, it's like, oh.
And they do gentle him, right? They cut him off from the one power permanently.
Yeah.
And we see it like ripped out of his chest, like black angel wings almost coming out to the sides.
Yeah, so it just felt like that they were building up for him to be more than he was. Or like maybe that's just supposed to be like their way of showing that like if men access it, even if they're not, the next coming of Christ or whatever, they just have so much more ability to fuck things up with it than like if a woman can.
No, I was gonna say I thought the land like this blade through his neck thing was great for me as like a book reader, and you guys too, because I was like, oh, what are they killing Lan off this early? Like I was like, super, oh my god, I can't believe they're doing this. Like, and then So, but then when Nynaeve healed him, and that was so I thought that was like a great little twist that I was surprised at.
Yeah, it's one of those things where they have not necessarily changed anything in the long run dramatically from the book, but it is such a change of the way that these events are presented here, and Nynaeve and Lan being there for it. And I'll just say, as to what you're saying, Keeley, about like how powerful Logain is exactly, I think it's not the case that just any man who can channel is remotely as powerful as Logain, and he is the biggest threat I think they have set up in the novel and a little bit in the show, like the most powerful like male channeler false dragon that the Aes Sedai have had to face in a very long time. But something else has to be going on here, right? Because Moiraine is saying Egwene may be the most powerful channeler, most powerful Aes Sedai potentially that they've encountered in 800 years or since Ardor Hawking's Day, Hawkwing's Day or something. And then, I don't know if they didn't give us this line in the show because it would have spoiled the end of this episode, but we know from Eye of the World that Moiraine is like having these conversations with Nynaeve and studying her and testing her, and then she says, either to her or to Lan, yeah, Egwene was the most powerful potential that I had encountered, that any Aes Sedai's encountered in maybe a millennium. Nynaeve is at least twice as powerful as her, like absurdly powerful. So there's all these characters popping up, and I think maybe that's why Moiraine is like wondering about Logain and whether they're all like all this power is coming into the world in a way that the Aes Sedai are not really prepared for. We learned that there are now 5 potential dragons, so help me out here. We know from the first episode, okay, I guess they are all accounted for. Moiraine says it's Mat, Egwene, Rand, Perrin, and now even though they already established Nynaeve is supposed to be 5 or 6 years older, that she is the 5th potential one, and that's like the big reveal at the end of this episode. But are they trying to say they did have a scene in the first episode, right, where it's ambiguous what her childhood was because she was a foundling just like Rand and she was brought from somewhere else just like Rand. So I guess they're trying to make it unclear. Maybe she was born 20 years ago, which Logain was also not. So that should have ruled him out. But Moraine's like, I don't know. Maybe we got the prophecies wrong or something. Because we did learn maybe in episode 3, I'm forgetting which one now, Moiraine reveals that 20 years ago, she got this super old Aes Sedai who was dying, had like a deathbed prophecy that the Dragon Reborn had just been born, right? And that's sort of the reason that Moiraine has dedicated her life to this path. And she knew like the exact moment of birth that the baby was supposed to come into the world. But yeah, so huge revelations there, seeing the warder relationships and things developing with Lan and Nynaeve. We get a fun scene of Alana's two bisexual warders who are like kind of cuddling by the fire, and then the three of them go off to a tent together. And Nynaeve is like, do they? And we learn stuff about the Green Aja, that they can have a lot more than one warder. And often they are very, very intimate with their warders.
I liked the campfire warder scene because you can tell in the book, especially throughout the rest of the books too, but in the first one, there's like this weird, the warder like relationship is just really strange. Like it's not something that I could describe in the non-novel, the real IRL. You know, like there's nothing that's similar to me. It's like this weird sibling-esque, but like sexual repressed, like, but also like warrior kind of weird thing going on. And I think each episode contributes it. Like there's, Caleb, when you and I were texting about the bath scene with Moiraine and Lan, and you question, this is kind of weird. What's going on here, But then they have like so I thought they do a good job of making that relationship kind of strange.
Yeah, and on air for that first episode, Katie had described it as she got the vibe from the bathtub scene. Oh yeah, this like establishes that Lan and Moiraine have this kind of old married couple thing going on, or there's at least some sort of intimacy from many long years, this casual easiness with which they share everything with one another that we get expanded on with the scene between the two of them in this episode where and we even learned that like Lan getting drunk can get Moiraine a little bit emotional. Like he's like, oh, you're always emotional when I drink, because of the bond they share. And this really like almost you can imagine like going for decades and decades and decades sharing this emotional link with someone, like the kind of intimacy that creates, which one of the Aes Sedai or one of the warders tells us is, yeah, there's nothing else quite like that bond. It's different from a husband and wife. It's different from parent and child. It's different from any friendship. And we already start to see the tension that might give with Nynaeve and Lan and the feelings that they are kind of having for each other, because we are also sort of informed the sexual warder relationship thing, that's like specifically a Green Aja thing. That's not something that the other Ajas do. And notably, did you pick up, Keeley? I don't think they said it explicitly. Maybe they did, that the Red Aja don't have any warders at all, that it's only the Green Aja who do.
Yeah, I noticed that at least in the show, that like it's just kind of Liandrin on her own with like the other women, that she doesn't have any established warders, because like they would have been around the circle, but it just feels like they've done such a good job of separating that, like, the blue and the green Aes Sedai can be friends and like their warders hang out, and the red are just like off being determined to be good cop, bad cop, and not have any kind of interaction.
Yeah, they're really establishing all that and hinting that there's a lot of politics in the White Tower. We get mention of the Amyrlin Seats orders and whether the Reds are far enough from the White Tower right now that they'd be willing to break the direct command of the Amyrlin Seat. So I'm curious to see how much of that we get in season 1 that we don't in Eye of the World. There's like almost no White Tower politics or scenes, I don't think, in Eye of the World. And those are some of my favorite parts of the book. So it'll be cool to see if we get more of that politicking. Meanwhile, Rand and Mat are following Thom, who saved them from Dana. And we get more interesting possibility here. This is something that's, I think, clearly not in the book at all. The idea that the idea of Thom picking up and expressing to Rand that everything that's happening to Mat now, like the whispering he's doing, the going off, the suspicion and the paranoia, this seems a lot like when my nephew Owen started touching the One Power and then, wound up basically indirectly killed by the Aes Sedai, who cut him off from the One Power. The Red Aja showed up, cut him off from the One Power, and then he shortly after was just utterly depressed and committed suicide and died at the dinner table. But this was, I thought, a pretty interesting condensation of a lot of the Rand and Mat traveling scenes leading up up to Thom's dramatic sacrifice with the Fade who shows up. But this happens in Whitebridge in the novel, and here it happens on just some small farm. We meet a family very briefly before they meet a grisly end in the farm. There's a more misdirection that for a moment, like it's like Matt like holding the dagger and looking around, and he's among all these like dead bodies of the family with blood pouring out everywhere, and you think he might have murdered them, and something is whispering to him, and there's something like black that's coming out of his mouth that he's vomiting at various points in the episode. But then the dagger like leads him in this really ominous way to point up and be like, I see you, to the Fade who is in the shadows up in the rafter. And oh, the Fade killed them, not Matt, because they really set us up to think that Matt had just straight up murdered this whole family.
It's interesting you said that, because I took it as I still felt like he killed them even throughout the episode, because
oh really? Okay.
I felt like Rand and Thom came in and were like, oh God, what did you do? They saw the Fade, and I still felt like there was this energy of pull Matt away from what he's done, because like this is terrible. Like I was not 100% sure at the end whether I felt like Matt, because I think in the books, I don't remember, does Matt kill anyone innocent in the first book because of darkness or whatever?
Not where we are. Rand has like stopped him every time, right, Keeley? Yeah. That he tries to get like, we should kill them and take their axe, or no, they're definitely a dark friend, we should kill them. And like whispering at his little dagger and caressing it in his pocket, my precious. Like,
I mean, even the fact that like I'm questioning whether they did, and you're saying they didn't, means they did a good job with the scene, because it was very like ambiguous.
Yeah, I definitely felt like that whole scene was playing out to show that he didn't. Because at first I was like, oh, come on, dude. Yeah. And then when he pointed the knife and the Fade showed up, I was like, oh. So, yeah, I took it away as that he didn't. Especially because the little girl, I think, just reminded him so much of his sisters. So, and like he makes eye contact with her dead body as they're leaving. So I just kind of felt like I feel like Matt is very much like the Boromir, can be corrupted, but not that much.
Yeah.
Where like he would do something because like his sisters are everything. So like that's why he wants to go home, is because like his sisters.
Oh yeah, and the girl gives him her little Brigida doll named after the hero of the hunt, who I don't think we've heard about at this point in the show. Maybe she was in Thom's songs earlier. I don't think so. But that was a really sweet scene. There were a lot of, we talked about this, Keeley, in text, like every character in the show is about 50% or more emotionally honest and open with one another than they are in Eye of the World. And even Thom Thom is emotionally honest with the boys when they're on the run in the book. And he does the same thing here, that he's concerned about them because of what his nephew went through, and he sees him in them, and he's going to do everything he can to get the boys out safely, even though so far it's like he gets like maybe a couple scenes of episode 3 and a couple scenes of episode 4 before he is staying behind to try and stop the really frightening Fade. I think they've done a good job with the Fades here, so that the two boys can escape. But he convinces Rand to be look out for him. Like you got to help each other. And there's this very sweet scene of Rand and Matt lying in the barn and hay next to each other, and Rand being like, you can trust me, right? Like I'm here for you. You can tell me what's going on. Which was just like, Rand expresses all that inside in his head in Eye of the World, but it's so rare in the novel for any of these damn Two Rivers characters to just say what they feel about one another or to express concern for one another. So I thought that was a really good moment. And this show has done such a good job of humanizing all these characters. The actors, I think, have a lot to do with that. I think every one of us has said in WOTCast so far at some point that we're feeling more connection to these characters early on than we were in the novel. And you're nodding, Keeley, I could see, and smiling there. That yeah.
Yeah, I think that was like one of the first things that I complained about the books, was that like, as soon as the boys start having the dreams, they're like, oh, don't fucking tell anyone. Like, tell everyone everything. None of you have any idea what the hell is happening. So I was so happy, first episode that Moiraine was like, y'all fucking dreaming? You got to tell me. Like, thank you. Like, that took that away. And then, with the whole scene with Thom, and then, Rand speaking up. And this also so much to me is like, I don't know if Robert Jordan intended this, but kind of like a commentary on just mental illness in general, right? Because like they're the age of onset for many major mental illnesses, which is like that late teens, college age. And so this is why I want Eric's opinion on all of this too.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like,
we should have.
you know, the if all of these boys and potentially Egwene are starting to develop like these different things, like where, you know, they're potentially hearing voices and taking that away from them leads to them killing themselves. Like so much of this is screaming like we need a mental health podcast
Yeah.
where they talk about what this means. So I just really appreciate that, like, you know, they're showing the dynamics between all of the friendships and all of, you know, the different characters, but especially Rand and Matt, where, you know, Matt was being kind of a dick to Rand when they first got to the little town, where like he wasn't going to help do anything and he was just being pissy. But then, like, no matter what, Rand is still there for him. And it's like, you know, we grew up together. This is really hard. This is bullshit. But like, you can tell me anything. I was like, oh, like, look at you guys having emotional growth. I appreciate you.
The actor, I was talking with you on WhatsApp, was just so like compelling. Like I feel like he does such a good job of walking the line of like slight annoyance, like really cringy annoyance with Matt, but at the same time, like being super endearing. Like even in episode 3 with the scene with him talking with Dana, it's like this cringy, just leave her alone, man. But also it's like really charming. Like he does a really good job of walking that.
That feels so quintessentially Matt to me, like more so from book 2 than book 1, but being that borderline of the most annoying person there, but so charming and so like deep down actually a thoughtful and caring person, and the way that he feels protective about his sisters, about his friends. Yeah, I'm loving that performance. It's really sad that I think we won't be getting it in season 2, but you know, like we've been saying, the casting direction for this show is so good that I'm hopeful that the replacement actor that they got for him will be an equally emotionally resonant role. Because I really like these portrayals of all the characters, and Thom is becoming a little bit more Thom in this episode, I think. To my
the
head,
wheel weaves, Caleb. The wheel weaves.
Everyone comes back into again. It all returns. Which is another perfect segue to, I can't pick a favorite of the 3 major plots in this episode, but boy, do I love the Tuatha'an stuff. And this was already like, we talked on a few episodes of WOTCast ago, how much I loved these campfire conversations and the dance scenes with the Tuatha'an and with them explaining the way of the leaf, and the very deep empathy there that I felt like was a rare early moment of Jordan sort of doing more of what he's better at later, of really, expressing this culture in a really, I thought, empathetic and rich way. And the scenes around the campfire here with, is it Marie or Maria Kennedy Doyle? Let me look it up real quick to say. Marie Kennedy Doyle, wonderful Irish character actress playing, is it Ela here? Ela or Isla that she's playing here. She had me crying in her description of, like, you know, why she follows the way of the leaf and what happened with her daughter before, and why she's clean in this conversation with Perrin. I think Aram, her grandson, is wonderfully cast too. He's got that perfect, like, charming, you know, doesn't quite agree with his parents and grandparents' philosophy, might want to go out into the world thing going on. I loved all this. What did y'all think of Egwene and Perrin's detour here, now that we're getting more of the scenes here?
Yeah, I really liked all of the scenes with the Tinkers. I am so happy that they took out all of Perrin's being like a weird, jealous, protective dude when Egwene goes and talks and like does anything with Aram. I'm really happy that they took that out. Because that just felt like freaking weird, and like that I think that was playing into why the characters were reading so young to us. Where there were, you know, the only interaction or like emotional, you know, range that any of the boys were showing in the book so far, it's like, oh, well, Rand is so much better with girls. Like, that's like the only thing they talked about. Yeah, so I'm happy they took that out, and that they're showing, I'm really loving that they're showing kind of this like grief that Perrin is dealing with, and that by talking to someone else that went through such intense grief, it's kind of like showing him that, like, you can be okay. So like going back to the mental health, I feel like that was such a good scene between him and, I guess it's Isla or whatever. with her explaining that, because at least where I'm at in the book, they have not explained why Aram is with his grandparents. So it was neat to get some context from the show for why he's with them.
Yeah, and we get to, even the dance scene I thought was done really well. They have the music. We learn more about the song and Egwene, and I hope it is Aram. I really can't remember what the character's name is actually.
Yeah.
But played by somebody from Peaky Blinders, who what's his name? He's also an Irish actor, I think. Something McCormick, who I think is yet another casting that embodies that character well.
I mean, I thought the Tuatha'an scenes were really excellent. Like if you were talking back earlier in the episode about culture and distinctive, like energy and like dress and way of speaking, I felt like the Tuatha'an has been the best example of that by far so far. It's like very exactly kind of how you imagine the book. It stayed really true to it. And also the Egwene, like Aram thing, I think was like a good setup and just well done. A lot of chemistry between them. Well.
And we get hints from her in their conversation of something that we've talked about before, which is yet another thing that is a richer dynamic on the show, is the complicated romance between Egwene and Rand and the way that she still feels for him. And we talked about in episode 1, or at least Katie and I did, and then I think Dan and I did in episode 2, about, like you were saying, Keeley, these characters are not just like, giggling 13-year-olds who have never heard of sex before and are afraid of it. Like we have Rand and Egwene hooking up very early on, and we already get in episode 1 the complication of how they feel for each other and whether they're drifting apart, and that Egwene is going to become a wisdom, which in the show, if not the book, means that she's not supposed to take a husband or have kids. And here we get that she doesn't believe he's died because she thinks that she would know. She maybe that's related to her being able to listen to the wind and everything, but she's one way or another convinced that Rand is alive somewhere. And just having a frank conversation with Aram about that, why she's still like a little emotionally distant. So yeah, every character is getting something. I feel like we're getting something to hang on to in the relations between them.
The Perrin thing too was well done, because in the books too, Perrin kind of gets convinced by this argument of the way of the least violence is like not an answer, and I think they do a good job of him like questioning that when what's her name, Ilya or whatever was talking to him. And I think like even the what did she say, the line she says to him at the end of that scene, I think was like, when you picked up the axe or whatever, has your life gotten worse or better, or something alluding to like picking up a weapon. That helps play into Perrin's reluctance to like really engage in being violent.
I do feel like she was invoking a little bit of a correlation causation issue, given that if Perrin didn't pick up she didn't know what happened, but if he didn't pick up the axe, then he and Layla would both be dead, right? I guess is what Elias would say if Elias were here. It's like, it's not a good thing, but certainly a horrible thing that he did wind up killing her by accident in the course of that scene. Which, it's giving more for him to work with, because Perrin is somebody who I feel like really didn't start to become a character until after these scenes with the Tuatha'an in the book, and really starting to learn more of who he is. And this just allows us to shortcut getting faster to some growth and struggle with him, which I think also, Nick, will color Perrin's future relationships with other characters in an interesting way, having this background here. And that's the most I'll say about that. But I think it is generally a good change that the screenwriters for the show felt the instinct that he needed something a little more earlier on for audiences to hold on to.
Yep.
Anything else in this episode? I guess in terms of just like little world building things to know that the book hasn't revealed yet, we learned that Aes Sedai can link, and they can share their power and direct it through one person, who then combines, in this case, Leandrin has all the other Aes Sedai linked to her when they're fighting Logain to channel their combined strength to cut him off, to shield him, and then to gentle him. And we get Nynaeve's like a radiant sun scene at the end. Is that it? Anything else that we want to say about episodes 3 and 4 this week, and what we're feeling about the show?
I think that's it. Yeah, the only I had like episode 4 was me by like probably head and shoulders above the other 3 episodes. I thought it was really excellent. Like the only small thing that bothered me was like the whole Logain supposed to be Gul'dan or whatever in the book. They sort of like combined those, but I thought it was well done, and overall I thought the episode was really excellent.
Yeah, I think kind of the things that they've changed Well, you know that Elias is not there, so I was just thinking like, okay, if I was Perrin and a fucking wolf came up to me and just licked my wound, I would be absolutely terrified. So, you know, just thinking of like, what is Perrin going through that, like, you know, he accidentally killed this person that I don't know that Layla loved him because he said I love you and she said I know, which is like, oh, your poor
Seems to be
soul.
a rough marriage, yeah.
But like going through the grief of that and then being separated from everyone, and then I can't really tell what kind of relationship he has with Egwene because like first episode kind of opening scenes, him with Rand, there's a lot of creepy staring at Egwene happening from everyone but Perrin as well. And so I can't really tell what the relationship is with Perrin and her because maybe it's not intentional, but just like he's weird with her in some ways, and so I can't tell what that is. But that there's no, so Moiraine didn't give them any coins.
Oh no, they left that out totally, didn't they?
Yeah, they left that out. Yeah. So when she's talking to Lan and she's like, we lost them. It's like, yeah, because you didn't give them the fucking coins that would have told you if they were alive. And then there's no Padden Fane as the crazy guy was that in Whitebridge?
Yeah, we've had multiple appearances by him, and Berlin, I think, was one of them. But yeah, Padden Fane hasn't showed up again since he sort of backed away from the scene of the Trollocs savaging the Two Rivers. Yeah,
and I couldn't tell what that face was that he made. Was that like I'm not getting fucking involved in leaving, or was that like this is going to plan? Like that was a weird kind of thing from the actor. I can't really get a read on him, but we've had like 2 scenes with him.
I'm sure he'll be back before the end of the season. They can't fully skip those scenes with him.
I think probably like the biggest takeaway for me from this final episode was the quote from Lan to Moiraine, or maybe she said it to him, where they're talking about, does the Dark One know who the dragon is? And she said, I don't know. And he was like, I don't know if that's reassuring or scary. And I was like, very good point. Like, we don't know if that's a good thing either.
Yeah, all really good points. And I guess we'll see how all of that develops as it goes on. I'm really excited for the next episode. We're booking through plot. What is it? It's going to be, is this a 10-episode season? I forget. 10,
it's
9
8.
or 10? Only 8. Okay. Wow.
It's
so
8.
we're halfway through it now. They've got a lot to cram in, but they're moving fast, and I guess we're definitely getting season 2. So yeah, we'll see what comes of it. Yeah, thank you so much for being with us this week, Nick. It was awesome getting your input on this.
Definitely great to like nerd out with someone who actually knows what I'm talking about. Whereas Marcy, my wife, is sitting there like, what happened? What is the dragon again? Is that like an actual dragon or?
Oh, she's watching along the whole way on these.
Watching.
Does she have general thoughts? Is she interested in the show at all, or is it not really her wheelhouse?
I think following it, because I told her it's sort of like Game of Thrones, so I think that piques her interest. But she's those are a lot of questions, so it's good to have that foil because I can tell it starts to reveal to me like what they are doing like really well and not, or what they're communicating well and not. Like they dropped the Amerlin seat name at some point, or title at some point in the episode, and it was kind of just passed over, and there were other things that she's kind of curious about, but I think she's enjoying it so far.
Nice. Yeah, and I feel like that's even the experience of reading the book. There's so many names thrown out, so many background items that you have no idea until much, much later the context for anything.
Yeah, well, thank you for letting me jump on.
Yeah, awesome to have you. And maybe we'll have you back for some future show caps. This episode of WOTCast was produced by yours truly. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Caleb Wimble. Keeley, where can people find you?
On Twitter and Instagram at Keeley_reads.
And Nick, I should have asked before the show, but do you have a web presence that you're interested in sharing?
No, it's okay.
Okay, that's fine. And remember, you can find us all, the regular hosts, at WOTCast.net. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at WOTCast Podcast, and support the show at patreon.com/WOTCast, where for $5 a month at the Tarvalent tier, you can get access to those special bonusodes we mentioned, including the 2 Dune saga episodes so far. Your support means a lot. Even $2 at the 2 Rivers tier helps. But you can support us completely free by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your podcast platform of choice. Number 2 way we find new listeners. The number 1 way, of course, is to tell a friend about the show. Word of mouth means the world to us. That's all for today. Thanks so much for listening, folks. And remember, this is not the ending. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but this is an ending. Farewell. All right. But yeah, it's great to have you, Nick. Jumping on like sort of last minute, figuring, oh, everybody's on.
Love it. Dude, anytime. It's like I get so excited about these episodes and I've never talked about them.
Yeah, that's the problem with it not having quite the cultural ubiquity of Game of Thrones by the, I guess it wasn't for the first couple seasons, but Wheel of Time fans are fewer and harder to find since the 90s, I think, when it was much more common for anybody in the high fantasy.
I just posted in the chat, Rafe Judkins just did an AMA 2 days ago where he answered questions about the show.
Ooh, nice.
So I'm probably reading spoilers by reading his answers, but I won't remember it until we get to it. But it's pretty interesting. I saw there was this because I was looking does Barney Harris have a social media presence, and he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I did see that Rafe has seen the replacement actor in a couple scenes and thinks that he's going to be a good fit and that people will like him. Also that they're hoping that this show will go on for at least 8 seasons. So we're getting set up to be officially let down.
If they do not.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
The first question, why are you not using any of the Wheel of Time swears? And he says blood and ashes, give us some time, it's coming.
Oh, yeah, that's true. They haven't. I didn't even notice that. Like, you mentioned the dialogue was a little different, but yeah, we haven't had light blind me, light burn me. Yeah, some of these are major spoilers. How do you manage, not a spoiler, how do you manage your mental health while doing such a huge project? I sat in silence for 30 long seconds after reading this question. It is a good one. Haha, is Rafe's answer to that.
The hop, guys, but thanks a lot.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your Thanksgiving Black Friday weekend.